All right. So now Mid-Atlantic, so Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and Washington, D.C. area. I think Delaware is probably the most interesting one of those areas because they seem to have some really cool fireflies there. Chris Heckscher works on them. This is Photurus bethaniensis, the Bethany Beach firefly, eastern shores of Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and a little bit into North Carolina. They love freshwater interdunal swale habitats, wet areas behind sand dunes, and you find bayberry and baccharis shrubs in that area. Late June to early August, so a little later, given that it's further north, firefly season is a little later there. It gets warmer there at that time, so you can see them a little later during the year. Time to survey after dark. Green flashes, 2 of them, and 3/4 of a second apart, and then every 5 seconds. And there's a picture on the bottom here, bottom right, from Lynn Frost's book with the flash patterns, or you can see the double flashes with the interval then. It has a dark marking on the pronotum head shield that widens towards the tip. So it's kind of like hourglass shaped for this one. You will see the stripe on the elytra that is typical for Photurus. And for this one, you have to be, for your surveys, you have to have permission in a lot of cases because the sites will likely be in protected areas like those sand dune areas. You have to be careful because of sensitive plant and protective plant species. So it's probably likely you will need permission. And this is also very important that you have that permission. And again, find out if you can catch, release, catch, keep. Yes, so Chris Heckscher sent me this one, the picture. This one is from, I think, yeah, he is in Delaware, so he has definitely observed this and studied this one. Then there's a few pictures on the left top is a habitat picture of this firefly. So you can see this sand dune habitat with some shrubs and some vegetation. So this is a good picture for us. We talked in the photography lecture yesterday, take a habitat picture. So, we can share that and, figure out where it's a good time to look, a good place to look. So we, can concentrate our survey time on going and finding things that we know are in certain places. And then if you go to a new place, you can look for similar habitat. The picture on the bottom left from taken by Richard shows this black vita on the head shield that kind of gets wider and broad at towards the head, but it's also widened at the bottom, so kind of like a weird hourglass shape surrounded by red. So again, overall a very superficially, like very much looks like Photurus. And then here on the right, you have a male in a plastic tube that Richard took a nice picture of the underside. You can see the very bright white light organs and the coloration of the legs and pronotum from the underside. I don't think, yeah, the flash pattern is also, I think, for the region fairly distinctive with the 2 flashes in the break. And then you have in the same kind of area, like different kind of like habitat, but in the same like Delaware, Maryland, Photurus mystica lampas, which was described by Chris Heckscher. You can also find it in New Jersey, Eastern Virginia, and Eastern North Carolina. And this one is more different habitat. So peatland forests, freshwater river floodplains, around these the Nanticoke River, Mispillion, and Cedar Creek watershed. In those areas is where you find them. Atlantic white cedars and sphagnum moss are good indicators of the habitat that you should look in if you're around that. mid-June to late July. So again, a little later in the year, but earlier than the previous one. After dark, it's very typical for tourist species to come out right after dark. This one on the bottom right is the diagram, and here what to look for is a single yellowish green glow, so a little longer. And then again, a nice 3-second interval in between these glows. This diagram shows the glowing at between 80 and 85 degrees. The elytra are setose or hairy, so there's a lot of hairs on the elytra. That's a character for them. The scutellum, the coccyx, and the thorax are kind of pale looking color-wise. And then they're actually slightly oval compared to most other Photorus species. So this one is a little different than some of the other ones in the general habitus. So when you can see on the picture from Chris Heckscher that it's the widest in the middle of the elytra. So that's unusual. But then again, it has the stripe on the elytra like most other Photorus species. Again, this one mostly in protected areas. So get permission, please, if you do a survey. And be careful of your surroundings if you're in these peatland forests and river floodplains. We have a little more about the species. There are sketches of the pronotum and how different the maculations of the pronotum can look. So you can see that the black part of the maculations can be very wide or also very slim. So don't put too much into when you see a different one that looks very different from a picture we've shown you or something like that. So be aware that that is very variable again. And then picture of the Aediogus of the species. And this basically looks exactly like the one I dissected yesterday, Photorus congener from Florida. You have the filaments and the medium lobe and the lateral lobes, and it's very compact. And genitalia in Photorus look very much alike in every species. So not a good way to identify these. And then here, Candace took some nice pictures of habitats. You can find these guys, and I think she wants to chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. So the species has only been found in Maryland and Delaware so far, but that survey region, Heckscher and others suspect that it's probably found in other places as well. So the other states that Oliver mentioned. And I just wanted to comment too on that, the flash pattern when I was out surveying for this species, it is very distinctive. It's almost a flash verging on a glow, like Oliver mentioned. It's a bit of an extended flash period, or the actual flash itself. And so when I was out there, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to detect that, but it was very detectable in the site where I found the species. So definitely keep your eyes open for that.
Do they come out in bigger numbers? Did you observe like bigger numbers, or were they like just like a few specimens here and there?
There were a few. I think we counted around like 20 maybe. There were a lot of other like Photorus out as well at the site. I've heard, I think in Lynn's book, she mentioned, and maybe she got this from Kit, but that I think there are at least a couple sites where they saw up to 100, and the males were kind of, floating and like glow flashing kind of low on the vegetation. But yeah, we saw them primarily just above the vegetation along a creek, kind of in this like sphagnum area. Okay. It was really heavily vegetated.
Actually a picture of the flash pattern.
Yeah, there you go.
Again by Radim. So you can see it's like maybe like a second long or a little bit over half second long flash glow, kind of like extended thing, not just like a flash, but also not a full glow. So but just like right in the middle of those two. And I don't know how long this exposure was, but you can see there's decent numbers out, and it seems like there might be some other Photorus species mixed in the picture, not just Mystica lampus. So, and then next, another Photorus. The mid-Atlantic region is full of Photorus. The salt marsh firefly, coastal New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. Look around the upper edges of salt marshes. Look for bayberry, groundsel, marsh elder, typical plants that are around these marshes. Late May to mid-July, so pretty soon these guys will be out again after dark for Photorus. Look, when you see on the right side, picture by Stephen Luke, very typical Photorus species from the basic look. But the flash pattern is a single yellowish flash every 1 to 2 seconds. Low over vegetation. The head shield markings are hourglass shaped. The hindcoxae are pale, up to 12 millimeters long. And here again, interestingly, this is in the same habitat as Parectomina ecostata, which we're going to talk about again in the mid-Atlantic, because ecostata is in Florida and in the mid-Atlantic region, and not in between. So it's a very interesting distribution. And here for Salina, we have a couple of pictures by Richard, both of them. Here you have the ventral view of one. You can see the pale coxa and the femur are kind of pale in the beginning too, basally, and then towards the apex they get black. And then on the right side you have a habitat picture of where you can find them, and sure, close to a salt marsh taken. And Richard wants to chime. I think we have a video actually. Yes, this is a video of them flashing. I can play that again. So, and a little easier to find, I guess, right next to the road, but close to some kind of salt marsh, and very low, you can see. Okay. Richard,
can I jump in real quick,
yeah.
Oliver?
Yeah.
Just real quick, I would say with the salt marsh firefly, in some ways, one of the best ways of, it's a little circular logic, but the habitat specificity and the fact that they're displaying right over the salt marsh, and actually in this case they were pretty far out over the salt marsh, is a good way of distinguishing it from some of the species that you might find nearby, like Photorus heaves, that can be pretty similar both in their flash pattern and their physical appearance. And then just a funny little anecdote with this video. This was taken on the 4th of July, right near a beach in Delaware, and people were walking by, and I heard someone say, they saw the fireworks and they're like, man's fireworks and God's fireworks. And it was just a funny little anecdote.
So, yeah. And again, we're back to Parectomina ecostata, and here's actually the dorsal picture where you can see the stripe on the elytra. So it looks very, very much alike to a Photorus species, but it has the keel on the head shield that distinguishes it from those. And so, like I said, it's in Florida, but it's also on the coast of New Jersey, Delaware, maybe Maryland and Long Island. Not been found yet there, but nowhere south of that. So what happened to North Carolina and Georgia in I think a good hypothesis is that just the habitat destruction in those areas, with people, using more and more the beaches and building around water, that maybe they lost their habitat, and that's why we have this really weird distribution of being in the mid-Atlantic and in Florida, but not in between. And again, high marsh, wet pastures, and roadside ditches for them. Mid-June to early August, so limited this phenology because of further north, so not year-round like in Florida. The pale stripes, don't be fooled by them. Look at the pronotum, look at the keel on that, and also look at the flash pattern again, 1 second long, bright, explosive flash every 8 seconds. Can be in the same habitat as Futurus salina, but a different flashing. And they may not overlap in time, like each night, where Futurus salina is out earlier than Paractomina ecostata. And then again, porch lights. They may be on porch lights. So that's an okay way to find them. But very interesting. And I would actually be interested in checking the molecular of, and maybe some other, like the morphology and other things of a population in the North Mid-Atlantic and in Florida, to see what's going on there, if there's any kind of trajectory between for these species of speciation or differences between what's going on in Florida. So that would be actually be very interesting to at least take one of each or a couple places in the Mid-Atlantic and get DNA out of them, and then compare if there's any differences or if they're still completely the same. So, but Richard has collected these up there, so I have not. And there's a paper out by Jim Lloyd and Chris Hechter on the top, on Paractomina from Delaware. Richard?
So Katie asks, is Paractomina ecostata salt or freshwater marsh? The answer seems to be both. So you'll recall that Paractomina in particular are like super snail specialists. They, compared to other firefly groups that may also eat snails, Paractomina are like just all about snails. So they've been found inland, like in not saltwater habitats, but you can also see them, right over the salt marsh. And there's some interesting, ecology that could be explored here. Some of the mid-Atlantic salt marshes seem to be, their health seems to be impacted by an overabundance of grazing by snails. So it's possible that fireflies are playing an important role in salt marsh health, but it hasn't really been explored in depth.
Yeah, would be interesting to see if what kind of snails they eat up there compared to here. Like if there's an overlap, and I don't know what the snail distribution is, but if there's an overlap in snails, or if they're like specializing on different things up there than they do here. So, but when you look back at the lava that I showed you from Paractomina, you can tell that they are like the snails, like the pronotum is streamlined to go into snail shells, and the head can come out like very far to go into the snail shell to bite and the snail when it's retracted into its shell. So yeah, they're very good snail hunters in this genus.